Hello everyone and welcome back to Art History Shorts. So this is the first video in a small series where I'm going to be talking about the art movement Impressionism. In this one I'm going to just go over the basics of Impressionism and also the techniques and the themes that we'll see in particular paintings and upcoming videos. So roughly in the 1860s, artists were not only continuing but also pushing forward the realist principles of painting very simply what they saw, thought, and felt, or impressions of life. The term Impressionism was actually meant to be an insult given by a critic while viewing artworks by Monet. The Impressionists, like the Realists, were not interested in painting history, mythology, or the lives of great men, and they didn't seek a certain kind of perfection in visual appearances. They wanted to show a landscape, a person, a thing, as it appeared to them at a certain moment in time. This meant these artists were working quickly to capture moments, how the light would reflect off the water, a building, a wheat field, and because of the quick nature of what they wanted to do, we see brushstrokes becoming looser and more undefined. There was less clarity to their artwork, but more brightness, energy, and movement. They weren't as concerned with capturing correct proportion and perspectives. This doesn't mean, of course, that there was a lack of skill involved, just a different motivation in what they wanted to express. For them, painting the real meant something much different. The world was imperfect. People were imperfect. Why pretend otherwise on canvas? With the invention of photography and the ability to see things exactly as they are, the Impressionists asked, why not show the world in all its imperfections? Why not capture that? The Impressionists, like the Realists, were rejected by official exhibitions and painting competitions set up by the French government, so they organized their own group exhibitions, which the public was initially hostile to. The public was used to looking at art in a certain way, and these Impressionist artists were turning it upside down. Art went from intricate and accurate to loose and suggested. So in some regard, it's somewhat understandable to imagine how people would react to this pretty drastic change in appearance and philosophy. A good example to see this change taking place is with two works done by Manet. Like I mentioned in my video about Manet's Luncheon on the Grass, he was considered a bridge between the Realists and the Impressionists. Notice the subtle differences in his painting Olympia, done in 1863, to A Bar at the Folies Bergère, his last great work done in 1882. See how his brushstrokes blur, the rough application of paint, how he draws attention to the surface of the canvas. For the most part, you can boil Impressionism down to the subject matter and to the technique. We get landscapes and scenes from modern, urban, and suburban life, real people doing real things, painted in bright, pure colors, with a looser, unveiled brushstroke. Because of this focus on landscapes and the light and everyday life and people, artists often worked en plein air, meaning outside, working quickly to capture the scene and the light. Because of their working quickly, we start to see the semi-abstract subject. The artists start to play with how the eye interprets what it sees. Figures are broken down into a few strokes, or the leaves on a tree are represented as masses of color and light, and yet our eyes can decipher them. This was pretty groundbreaking for the time. Simple things like the innovation of ready-made paint in tubes contributed to the movement, as well as, like I mentioned before, more complex innovations like photography. Another thing that influenced this movement was art from Japan, that people in Europe were gaining access to. In particular, this Japanese art was called ukiyo, and I'm actually going to be doing a separate video that talks about this more in depth. The styles practiced by the Impressionists varied considerably, and in fact, not all of the artists would accept being called an Impressionist, but they did all agree on the commonalities I discussed around visual perception and representing the fleeting moments of modern-day life. Sometime in the 1880s, Impressionism actually started to gain traction as a legitimate movement and one that the public did want to see and own pieces of as well. It started with people in America who wanted these works from France, and so many of these artists were successful in their lifetime, including Monet, who did quite well for himself. And we'll actually be looking at one of his works of art in a later video as well. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this brief look at Impressionism, and if you'd like, subscribe to the channel to learn in more detail about the artists that I'm going to be talking about coming up. See you then!